vaccination program was flying. I mean, today, 2/3 of our whole population are double vaccinated. 80% of over 12-year-olds are double vaccinated. So we've done very well on that. But what's happened since May? We've had labor shortages. We've had the fuel crisis. We've had the energy crisis. You've got inflation. I mean, you've got a potential of interest rates going up and taxes going up. So suddenly this V-shaped recovery is happening. There is a bounce back, but it's a fragile recovery. So with the energy crisis, we've realized how vulnerable we are because we're dependent so much of energy coming from abroad.
That lack of gas storage means we're very dependent on global spot prices, wholesale prices. We can't buy gas and store it. That was a mistake, wasn't it?
I think it was a mistake. I think because we're so reliant on just in time, we thought, well, we don't need the storage. In a time of crisis, you need that storage. And that, again, reinforces the need for the urgency of getting on with the renewable. The sooner we have hydrogen, there's a potential of piping hydrogen to every household and changing gas boilers to hydrogen boilers. I mean, just imagine, that is a huge, it's transformational if we can make that happen.
We had Gareth Stace on Money Talks very recently, the very knowledgeable head of UK Steel, the trade body for our steel industry, which still employs 33,000 people. We are a very high cost energy place to make steel. And that was the case even before in the eyes of the steel industry, this green agenda put up the price of energy in this country. It's just more expensive than it is in Germany to get energy here. And that was before the recent energy crisis with wholesale prices soaring. I know Gareth Stace and UK Steel and many other industry trade bodies were deeply disappointed in this budget, Lord Villamoria. There wasn't help for the big energy intensive manufacturers, steel makers in this country that employ many people in many of these red wall seats, decent jobs in parts of the country that aren't particularly wealthy at this point. Shouldn't there have been more in the budget?
There's no question about it. We need to be much more competitive with our energy prices. And that's why I go back to it. The sooner we can have renewable energy that is at scale and that is really affordable, everyone benefits from that. And that is a matter of urgency. But in terms of the budget and help, even the £400 billion we're so grateful for as business. And we worked, by the way, the CBI worked with government, all the schemes, whether it's the job retention scheme, the bounce back scheme, do you remember the low 100% guaranteed loans?
Yeah.
I meet people, businesses today. I played a big part, I'm proud of it myself, to get that through because government initially wouldn't guarantee 100%. They said, we'll only guarantee 80%. And then Germany started guaranteeing 100%, Switzerland started guaranteeing 100%, and eventually government listened. Over 1 million businesses, mainly SMEs, have taken out those loans. I meet them regularly and they say, thank you, you saved my business. I was shut. There were events businesses. For 18 months, they had no business. And government couldn't help them at all. There are 3 million people called the excluded who got no help at all. With rates, Heathrow Airport, their rate bill is £100 million a year. They got hardly any support for that. Their business was down 98%. So it's been very difficult for the government. They've tried to help as much as possible. Not everyone has been helped.
The Treasury's promised for a long time now as a manifesto commitment, a proper upheaval of business rates. Where is it?
It is something that we have been crying out for. And let's, again, put this into context. Our business rates are 4 times higher than Germany. Our business rates are 3 times higher than the OECD average. And one of the helps that the government gave during the pandemic was rates relief to hospitality industry. That helped so much. I mean, Cobra Bay, we supply 7,000 restaurants. They were shut for more than half the pandemic. Things like that, rates relief, really helped. The little bit help that you just spoke about in the budget is going to help, but it's a long-term reform that we need. And at the moment, it's ironic.
He needs to grab hold of this, doesn't he?
He does need to do it. He keeps promising to do it.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Guys, welcome to Brazier. Some fast-paced news from 4 until 6. Coming up for you in the next hour, Britain's transport network is on the verge of being derailed with the threat of more industrial action this summer. Weeks after members of the RMT walked out in that dispute over pay and conditions, you'll remember they closed most of the rail network, the Train Drivers Union, ASLEF, is now balloting members on strike action which could cancel 90% of trains. We'll get the latest with the travel editor at The Independent, Simon Calder. Also, countries around the world could soon be competing for the top spot on the UK's deportation list. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is set to introduce the so-called League Table of Nations, judging them on their level of cooperation and accepting criminals and failed asylum seekers from the UK. I'll be joined by an organisation who've been calling for precisely that measure since 2018. After 4:30, we've got Peter Szijjártó, the Hungarian Foreign Minister, who'll join me here in the studio, fresh from a meeting with Liz Truss, our Foreign Secretary. We'll be talking to him about migration, food security and the country's relationship with Britain, and the fact that if you live in Hungary, you pay no income tax. If you've got 4 kids, they're very keen on people having them. And with me for the next 2 hours, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin McKenzie, and we'll bring you the latest news headlines a little later on. We're going to start with that main story. Triple action, a triple threat of strike action on the UK's rail network. It's a matter of weeks after members of the RMT walked out in a dispute over pay, working conditions. Today, the Train Drivers Union has left balloted members over industrial action later this summer. The RMT and the union which represents onboard staff and ticket office staff, that's the TSSA, they're also planning further action, a combined walkout they claim could lose up to 90% of traffic on the network. It's not just trains that seem to be derailed as the summer of discontent carries on. Chaos in the air too. British Airways axing flights for up to 105,000 holidaymakers this month. Britain's biggest airlines told airport slot authorities that it's cancelling more than 650 flights from Heathrow and Gatwick in order to avoid repeat of last month's chaos. Let's turn to the travel editor at The Independent, Simon Calder, who joins me now. Simon, welcome to you. ASLEF, Train Drivers Union, serious about a strike?
Oh, they certainly are. Well, they're certainly balloting. And as you will know as well as I do, Colin, when a union ballots, it kind of already knows the result in most cases. So I'm here at Waterloo Station, the busiest station in the UK. Also a favourite. I know of Kelvin's. I remember him telling GB News that he's got a mate here who he doesn't believe is overworked. I'll leave it like that. But yeah, we still have the threat of more cancellations from RMT, more strikes. Yes, it was 2 weeks ago. We were kind of in the middle of this new 6-day strike by members of the RMT union that took out the signal system at Network Rail for the vast majority of the country. That was very, very damaging. Now, as you say, the Transport Salaries Staff Association, they are after inflation matching increases, which obviously means a double-digit pay rise. On top of that, ASLEF are balloting. Now, the train drivers, as I think pretty much everyone knows, are reasonably well paid. Their pay ranges generally, basic pay between about 50,000 and 77,000. The highest rates are on Eurostar trains to Paris and Brussels. But they believe that many of their members haven't had a pay rise since 2019. They are concerned about pensions, working arrangements, and so on. And so they are balloting to strike. Now, they've actually got a referendum out about a paid deal in Scotland. So ScotRail might be all right. But otherwise, you're going to see there's ballots going on for Great Western, running from Paddington Station to Bristol to Cardiff to the west of England. LNER, the East Coast mainline operator, going from London to Yorkshire, Tyneside, and then on to Scotland. Northern trains, really important in the whole of the north of the country, from kind of South Yorkshire upwards. Southeastern, taking commuters in and out of Kent. TransPennine Express and West Midlands train, who are basically in control in the West Midlands. All of those ballots close next Monday. And of course, as you know, Colin, they have to give 2 weeks notice of any industrial action. So that would take us pretty much to the beginning of the last week of July, so roughly 25th, 26th, if they called a strike immediately. And just if you're thinking, they haven't mentioned my train operator, don't worry, Avanti West Coast and Cross Country are also balloting for strike action, but those don't close until the 27th of July. So however you look at it, the rail passenger looks as though they are squeezed yet again in a battle between the management, who ultimately are the UK government, and the unions, who feel that they are being hard done by.
And Simon, just briefly, just so I can really wind up Kelvin McKenzie, those average train driver salaries you mentioned, 50 to 77,000, do they include overtime, which I know a lot of train workers, train drivers do plenty of? Do those average figures include overtime?
Well, I have just been told that is pay, according to ASLEF. And forgive me, Colin, and if I was working for Kelvin, he'd probably show me the door or my P45 right now. But I haven't delved into what they cover. And so, but yeah, I think the lowest wages you will be interested to learn perhaps are on the Isle of Wight, where they are barely scraping above 50,000 a month, whereas 70,000 is perhaps more likely elsewhere. And of course, there's been lots of confusion, perhaps fostered by government ministers, sometimes effectively saying that rail workers are extremely well paid. Well, certainly train drivers are well rewarded for the very professional job they do, keeping us all safe. But many other rail workers, possibly including Kelvin's friend here, would say that, no, they're most certainly not paid well. But whichever way you look at it, not looking great for the rails this summer. At exactly the time, of course, petrol prices going through the roof, and people more likely to turn to the trains to perhaps save a bit of money. But they could well be deterred. Bad news for the railways overall.
Simon Calder, good to talk to you as ever. Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Kelvin McKenzie's alongside me. Train drivers get paid quite well.
Train drivers get paid quite well, and the issue for their pay is simple. Somebody is going to have to pay it. And who is going to pay it? Either this is a state-owned business, either the taxpayer is going to pay it, and everybody's screaming, we've got the highest taxes now for 70 years, or the commuter or the train user is going to have to pay it. We've already got the highest ticket prices in Europe. Who is going to pay? And what these guys never mention, all these state workers who've got you like that, to be honest, all these state workers, right, get the most phenomenal pensions that nobody in the private industry can come anywhere near. Nobody mentions the fact. And we worry about the Great Resignation. That's the reason. All these guys do 30 years, whatever their job is, and they're out the door, whether you're a doctor or whether you're a train driver or whatever. They are in a fantastic position. I think we should take them on. just see whether this country can actually, strangely, do without going around by train. Honestly, I think if we just carry on doing what Boris normally does, oh, what's your name? Oh, here's the cheque, right? We'll be in a lot of trouble.
I'm not quite sure what that means, but it sounds like it could be potentially defamatory, so let's move on.
OK,
Kelvin,
fine.
thanks very much indeed. The Home Secretary is looking to create a so-called league table of nations based on their level of cooperation in accepting criminals and failed asylum seekers from the UK. Priti Patel will look to use the ranking system to place sanctions on countries who refuse to take back their own foreign criminals and reward countries who do, with things like visa applications being at the forefront. There are currently 11,300 foreign criminals living in communities in the UK awaiting deportation. Let's turn to the chairman of Migration Watch, Alp Mehmet, who joins us now. Alp, you've been calling for this for some time.
We have indeed, and we in fact made it one of our recommendations when we submitted into the consultation process that was around before the legislation got underway. Look, it's not anything new. It's something that we used to do 40 years ago, 45 years ago, when I was an immigration officer in Nigeria, when we would let it be known locally that unless people who were supposed to be coming back and hadn't shown up were presented to me and I saw them, until that point, I would not issue any visas to the bigwigs, frankly, who love their jollies. So I think that there's, in a way, the core of a good idea there. League tables, I think that's more for domestic consumption, frankly, rather than anything that's going to have any impact on the countries.
But Alp, if you want people to be part of this conversation, and you do, don't you? You want people to be informed and to consider the issues and be part of this conversation. You know the technical wherewithal of this, the intricacies. Most people don't. And for them, this league table is really useful. They can look at it, and you mentioned Nigeria. They can see that Nigeria, depending on how you cast it, either top or the bottom, Nigeria does well. You know, they play the game. But the countries like Bangladesh, Eritrea, let's say they're at the bottom of the table, they don't. They're not in any way India facing sanctions.
Yeah, look, I'm not saying that the idea of suspending applications from certain countries is a bad one. I think that's a good one. All I'm saying is that this business of league tables, it won't wash overseas, frankly. It's not going to put any pressure on the countries who are slow in taking back their nationals. What I'm suggesting is that if you put pressure on locally, that is much more likely to have an impact than publishing something in our press in this country that shows that certain countries are slow to take back their nationals.
Why not go the whole hog? You know, why not go the whole hog? Take a country like Pakistan, which is down there with Bangladesh and Eritrea when it comes to playing along with this quid pro quo. You know, Pakistan not very good at accepting back people who've failed their asylum applications, or foreign Pakistani-born criminals who've been deported, or the UK wants to deport back to Pakistan. They don't play along with that. But they do accept £250 million of taxpayer-funded foreign aid. Why not go the whole hog and say to countries that are not playing along with accepting foreign criminals and failed asylum seekers that you can't have our cash from our foreign aid budget then?
Fair point, and I'm sure that there are those who have considered it. The problem within government is that you're going to find that the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office is going to say, no, this is not going to happen. Others in Whitehall, other cabinet ministers, apart from Priti Patel, are going to say, no, we can't do that. But in principle, I see no reason why we shouldn't put all the pressure that we can on all those countries who are reluctant to take back their nationals. And that's what this is all about. This is really principally
about tackling what is going on in the Channel, as well as some of those who are in our communities around the country who should be deported and are wafting around there. That is only going to happen if you show to these countries that are guilty of what we've been describing that they will not be getting visas unless they start to play ball with us.
Alp Mehmet from Migration Watch. Alp, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Kelvin McKenzie listening in here in the studio. Priti Patel, she's trying it every which way.
She is, yes. I admire her because she'd probably be a lone voice because actually she would be, I'm not offering this as a career choice, but she'd be a very good GB News presenter, to be fair, because she actually believes in conservatism, which is at odds with what sounds like the rest of the cabinet. So people like Gove and co would always come up with intellectual reasons why that wasn't a good idea. I mean, I was staggered there. Were you not staggered to learn that 11,600 convicted criminals, ranging from murderers, rapists, fraudsters, the law, are still hanging around our country, fighting at every turn not to go back to their own country?
Sometimes with legal aid, often with legal aid.
Yeah, so our money is also keeping them in the country where we want to throw them out. I often wonder whether we are now living in a complete madhouse of people we don't want living here, and also people we don't want coming here either. So it's an appalling situation. I quite like the idea, actually, of saying we're not handing visas out to anybody. Why don't we just say nobody from Pakistan can come here until we get rid of whoever and whoever, right? It's as simple as that. Nobody would drop a tear in our country. Who'd drop a tear in our country? But the people who did come from Pakistan, who have relatives who want to come in, they put pressure on their government. Until that happens, I'm afraid we carry on with 11,600 people just basically going like that to us.
OK, Kelvin, for now, thanks very much. Downing Street says the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, had failed to remember he'd been told that Chris Pincher was the subject of an official complaint about his conduct. The Prime Minister's spokesman made the U-turn announcement after initially denying the Prime Minister knew anything about the former Deputy Chief Whip's conduct, now confirming that Boris Johnson was briefed on the complaint by officials at the Foreign Office in 2019. The MP for Tamworth was suspended last week after being accused of groping two men at a private members' club whilst drunk. Let's turn to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who joins us now from Westminster. Tom, this has got the makings of a story that is not going to fizzle out.
No, and certainly the way that Number 10 has reacted to this story has made it in many ways worse for the government than it needed to be. The shifting sands of the position of Number 10 has really accentuated this story into something bigger and something more protracted than it could otherwise have been. It was interesting listening to the Prime Minister's official spokesman this morning. I say this morning, it's normally this morning. Actually, it was so delayed, the lobby briefing this morning, that we were sat around waiting for 35 minutes after it normally begins. After midday, the Prime Minister's spokesman finally turned up in the lobby briefing room of number 9 Downing Street to tell us assembled journalists there that what had gone on was a length of time to establish the facts. The argument from Number 10 as to why there was a different line from the government minister on Monday morning through to Sunday morning through to Monday morning through to Tuesday morning, why that line seemed to have shifted, is because it took time, they say, to establish the facts. Initially, their argument goes, the Prime Minister didn't remember that he was briefed about this FCDO investigation into Chris Pincher that began in 2019. We understand reported in early 2020. The Prime Minister, of course, having recently won an election at that point. We all remember how long ago the early part of 2020 feels, before COVID, of course, just as Brexit was finally settling down. All of the change that has occurred since then, the argument of Number 10 now is that the Prime Minister initially did not recall what was a non-official briefing to him at that time, and it took time for him to be reminded of that briefing. Now, that's the line that Number 10 say. However, to many people that does sound less than credulous, because of course it's not every day that a relatively senior minister is officially investigated for impropriety, particularly sexual impropriety. There's a big question now as to who was telling the truth. Did the Prime Minister really have trouble recalling this briefing, or was the Prime Minister less than truthful? And particularly, was he less than truthful to the ministers that were sent out on those morning rounds on Friday, on Sunday, on Monday and this morning? That's the big question. Who here is telling the truth?
Tom, thanks very much indeed. Tom Harwood there. Kelvin Mackenzie alongside me here in the studio. Is there a reek of moral decay, Kelvin, about this government, or is this just what happens mid-term?
Well, I tell you what, the truth about the matter is, I know this would come as a great shock to you, I'm a natural conservative. Boris is making it very, very tough for those of us who want to put the cross by the Tory name at the next election, or any election actually. Look back at the council elections, look back at the by-elections, to do it, right? I mean, this explanation is ridiculous. How many people how many ministers in his government were accused of sexual impropriety, to which he had to deal with the fallout of it? You know, the fact is, he's telling whoppers. Why doesn't he just abandon this and say, this is damaging your base? Why don't we try as best as you can within politics to come as close to the truth as possible, right? And if he doesn't do that, I honestly feel like I felt between 92 and 97. I honestly feel the game is moving away and we're going to face some terrible landslide in some form against the Conservatives. And perhaps they'll deserve it.
And perhaps they'll deserve it. Kelvin, thanks very much indeed. Coming up, the right to a second chance. New research by the Centre for Social Justice suggests criminals leaving prison with a job and accommodation, they're 10 times less likely to reoffend. What about the employers? Are they willing to hire offenders? Would you be happy doing business with one? The head of criminal justice at the CSJ, the Centre for Social Justice, will be my guest. Back in a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
It's 4:31. I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB newsroom. Cabinet Office Minister Michael Ellis has defended the Prime Minister, saying Boris Johnson didn't immediately recall the conversation in late 2019 about Chris Pincher's behaviour. It's after a senior civil servant this morning accused Downing Street of not telling the truth over claims Mr Johnson wasn't aware of official complaints. The Met Police says it's made changes to how its firearms division is run after a public inquiry into the shooting of 28-year-old Jermaine Baker found there were numerous failures throughout the operation. The inquiry concluded Baker was lawfully killed. He was shot at close range whilst taking part in an attempted prison break 7 years ago in North London. The officer told the inquiry he thought Mr Baker was reaching for a weapon. Climate change protesters have glued themselves to the frame of a copy of Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. 5 Just Oil supporters attached themselves to the frame and spray-painted the words "No New Oil" onto the plinth under the painting. The campaigners are calling for the government to halt new oil and gas licences in the UK. Tennis player Nick Kyrgios has been summoned to court in Australia to face charges of common assault against his ex-girlfriend. Australian police say he will face a magistrate's court next month. The player has made the Wimbledon quarter-finals and is due to play tomorrow. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.191 and 1.162 euros. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,485 and 31 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
We don't do many reports here, but a report by the Centre for Social Justice caught our eye because it suggests that criminals who leave prison with a job, accommodation and a bank account are up to 10 times less likely to reoffend. The study says linking prisoners up with an employer, ensuring they didn't end up rough sleeping or sofa surfing, and simple measures of support, things like getting to work, physically getting to work and having a bank account. Put those things together and reoffending rates were slashed from 64% to about 5%. A survey of 2,000 people also found more than 8 in 10 people believe prisoners should be provided with a job on release. But how can you make that happen? Should people who break the law be given a second chance? Well, most people think so. It depends on the offence, doesn't it? But can you absolutely ensure that they then get a job? Can you make people give ex-offenders employment? Emily Farley is the head of criminal justice at the Centre for Social Justice. That's the think tank, and she wrote the report and joins me now. Emily, welcome to you. These figures at first blush look fantastic. You know, if there's a job, reoffendings is slashed. But cause isn't always correlation, as they say in your line of work. And the types of people who want a job might be exactly the kinds of people who wouldn't reoffend, and therefore it's not a great surprise.
Well, I mean, the data is clear that prison leavers are up to 9 percentage points less likely to reoffend if they're in employment on release. You made reference to housing and other stabilising factors, and we know that those things hugely contribute to a reduction in reoffending rates for people leaving prison. But the reason why we're looking at this at the moment is because we're at the beginning of a 9-month programme of work where we're going to be digging into this and exploring what more we can do to help individuals leaving prison access meaningful employment on release. So we are launching a call for evidence, and you'll have seen the polling that's come out, which indicates that the public are actually very supportive of individuals leaving prison accessing work. and they would be happy working
What about,
with
I
someone
mean, the public, that, in a sense, the public thinking that's no great surprise. What's more interesting, and you must know, is how business feel about this. I mean, when we think of corporate Britain now, we think of a set of businesses that are desperate to do social good. They keep telling us how desperate they are to make the world a better place. And we look at companies like Timpson's, the cobblers stroke key cutters, who seem to have done really well at hiring ex-cons and turning lives around, and everybody seems very happy. If this was going to work, why aren't companies queuing up to do it?
Well, it's a good question. And actually, you're absolutely right to talk about Timpson. They are doing fantastic work and just leading the way on this. But there are other employers. I was recently at a conference looking at the new employment advisory boards, and there were a great number of employers there exploring how they can do this and what barriers, what they need to do to remove barriers to help future employees come and work for them who've spent time in prison. So there are other employers like Cook run a brilliant program for prison leavers. There are also smaller employers like Roasted Roosters who are doing fantastic work. So actually it is happening all over the place. And actually anecdotally, we've heard that getting employers on board isn't so much the issue as it is the other structural issues that the other barriers that are in place for people leaving prison. Research by the MOJ, for example, showed that employers who had taken on an ex-offender, 90% of them spoke about them as being motivated, reliable, good at their job. So those who have done it testify to the fact that it's worked so well. And these individuals, it's in a way it's the right thing to do, but also it's a savvy thing to do. They have a huge amount to contribute to the workplace, and it's a mistake on society for all of us to be overlooking the potential that employers have that prison leavers has as future employees.
OK. Emily Farley, good to talk to you. Appreciate your time. Thanks a lot. Kelvin McKenzie alongside me. What do you think of it?
Well, I'd like my question to that lady would be how many ex-cons does the Centre for Social Justice employ? And the answer, of course, would probably be nil.
We don't know that.
No, we don't know it, but you wouldn't have to be a genius to work it out, would you? Look, I'm massively in favour of it. It is a massive ask to have a bank account, a home and a job for somebody who has just come out of 3 years for bashing somebody over the head or defrauding your company of 400 grand or even something more serious. I know personally, through a wider friendship, a guy who got 9 years for drugs, and there were two remarkable things about that. One, actually, you serve 2 years and 10 months, right, one way and another for that. So that was a remarkable thing. But the other thing is he's an electrician, and he's come back to being an electrician, and he is, as far as I know, going straight, and he's earning good money. I mean, there is a future, but they've got to make a big stride to say that is behind them. And right now, they are in very good shape because every company in the country is looking for employees. So they're going to put aside something. But I mean, if you're an employee, Colin Brazier Limited, right? What was that? You got 5 years for GBH.
It was just a 3 in reality, Kelvin. Well,
you've served the first year here.
But the point about you, could you just stop laughing in the gallery, please? Just a final point. I mean, the point I made to Emily there was that there is a labour shortage. Companies are desperate to burnish their social credentials. They've got these massive ludicrous. And that goes in lots of different directions. Where is the will to do this? Because there's lots of brownie points to be earned. So HR departments of the big companies must have looked at this, mustn't they?
Well, I mean, I'm sure they're trying to do it. I don't doubt. I don't doubt that if you've. I mean, for instance, the other guy I know got 18 months. By the way, was Andy Coulson, the editor of the News of the World. By the way, he's doing just great now. He's a very successful PR.
I'm just told Emily Farley's listening into this, and she's not best pleased. Let's just go back to Emily if we can. Hi, Emily. Give Kelvin your best.
Hi.
Go on, Emily.
Sorry, what was that?
Were you taking umbrage with what Kelvin McKenzie had to say?
Oh, no, not at all. Interesting.
Oh, I was misinformed. Thanks for your time. We'll say thanks to Emily Farley and move on to our next story after the break, and that is going to be this one. We're going to be talking to Peter Szijjártó. Now, Peter's the Hungarian foreign minister who'll join me in the studio. He's just been meeting Liz Truss, actually. I'm not sure he can tell us the contents of their meeting precisely, but we will be talking to him about how Hungary deals with things like cross-border migration, food security, and the fact that they do more than pretty much any country, certainly in Europe, to encourage their young people to actually set about having a family. We'll be talking to him after the break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well.
I feel like I could take on the world.
Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Now, over 12,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel this year to reach the UK, that in spite of the Home Secretary, Priti Patel's tough stance on illegal crossings. But the UK, not alone when it comes to tackling large numbers of migrants, when it comes to people trying to cross borders into Western Europe. The Hungarian Foreign Minister says migration pressure at the country's southern border has reached a new level of danger. Peter Szijjártó is in the UK at the moment, discussing the war in Ukraine, the migrant crisis, and Hungary's relationship with Britain. I'm delighted to say he's joining me here in the studio, fresh from talks with Liz Truss, Britain's Foreign Secretary. Welcome to you, and we appreciate your time. Thanks for coming.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I was in your country in 2015 for the migration crisis. I remember being struck at the time by the muscular stance taken by Viktor Orban at the time. It wasn't very popular with much of the mainstream media elsewhere, but it was notable that a lot of those migrants who were trying to cross into Hungary and then ultimately to Germany chose to go around your country. Did that tough stance work in your view?
Well, I can tell you that we proved to be successful during the last 7 years to protect our border. And we had a clear goal, and we still have this clear goal, is to protect our people from those illegal migrants who are now threatening us with weapons. They are having now weapons, and they are not shy enough not to use them. During the recent days, they were shooting on each other very close to the Hungarian border. Now they continue to attack our policemen who are protecting our border.
Which border are we talking about? The one with Serbia?
With Serbia, yeah, the one with Serbia, which is the external border of both the European Union and the Schengen zone.
Peter, I've got to tell you, when I was there in 2015, I saw your riot police who were formed up on the line with the Serbian border there. And they eventually responded with tear gas, but only once they'd been faced by a deluge of rocks and masonry from migrants who were so upset. They simply couldn't force their way into a neighbouring country.
Look, here, what I can tell you is the following. International law and national law both speak very clearly. You are only allowed to enter a territory of another country if you are entitled. In a way, either you have the necessary documentation or you are fleeing from war, from a country which is directly impacted by the war. And no, you have no chapters of international law which would allow you to cross a border between two peaceful countries without documentation, aggressively, whatever. Serbia and Hungary are both peaceful countries. There's no reference in international law which would force us to let these people come in.
But they didn't actually want to stay in Hungary, did they? They were using Hungary as a transit route to Germany. Do you blame Angela Merkel for effectively saying to 1 million migrants, come on?
No, with all our respect to the Chancellor, I definitely don't want to accuse her with anything. I rather accuse Brussels and George Soros, because those NGOs, which are financed by the network of George Soros, are organizing migration itself. They are financing the pro-migration organizations. They are financing the trafficking activities, and Brussels encourages migration basically on a daily basis with statements, with lack of strong stance, and with international agreements like the Post-Cotonou.
Well, so, they would say, they're not here to answer that charge, OK? And the George Soros stuff, I don't want to get into that because I can't talk about it. I don't know about it. But I would say that Brussels would argue, wouldn't they? Look at Frontex. Look at what we've done in countries like Greece now. We've started to beef up the borders. We've learned from our mistakes. We're spending the money. We're putting border force officials there. Do you buy any of that?
No, I don't buy this argument, because if this had been true, we would not have been forced to stop 110,000 illegal migrants only this year. Only this year. We are now just in July, right? Beginning of July. So like 6 months have passed. And 110,000 illegal migrants had to be stopped at our southern border. If the protection of the external borders worked out well, if Brussels was not in favor of migration, this would not be the case.
Are any of them Ukrainians? I mean,
No. This is a totally different issue. When it comes to Ukraine, this is our eastern border. We have received already 830,000 Ukrainian refugees. And I want to underline the word refugees, because there's a war in Ukraine. Hungary is a neighboring country to Ukraine. Where should they go if not to the neighbors? And I come back to international law again. According to international law, if you have to flee from war, then you are entitled to stay on the territory of the next safe country. And Hungary is a next safe country. So it's obvious that we allow all the refugees from Ukraine to come in. But we do not allow those migrants who crossed several safe countries to enter the territory of Hungary.
Look, you've just had a meeting with the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss. I don't expect you to be able to divulge the nature of your conversation. Maybe you want to, I don't know. But let's say you'd have a meeting with Priti Patel, our Home Secretary, our Interior Minister, who's grappling with these thorny questions of how to keep that permeable border, even the one we have with our own sea, the English Channel, safe from illegal migration. What would your advice be?
Unfortunately, I couldn't give him an advice, putting into consideration that you have a maritime border and we have a land border. In the land border, it's obvious that you need to build physical infrastructure. That's why we have built fence. President Trump wanted to build wall, we wanted to build fence, and we definitely did build it. We have 2 layers of fence. We have 24/7 patrolling, surveillance, and once we see migrants attacking the border, our police forces can go there and push them back. But once again, I want to underline that these migrants are behaving now incredibly aggressively, using weapons, throwing stones, pieces of concrete, wood, whatever, on our police.
Why is this story, as you present it, with the increasing levels of violence, and presumably a lot of that's orchestrated by people traffickers, who knows?
Sure.
Why is that not getting more coverage, do you think?
Because the liberal mainstream says that we need to have open societies. It doesn't matter where you are coming from, who you are, we have to be welcoming. And in our case, it's obvious that we would like to keep Hungary as it is, a Hungarian country. And this is not because we would be good or bad people. This is because we want Hungary to be preserved as it is now. And we are not ready to allow those people to enter our territory who want to come to Hungary this way, totally disrespectful to our regulations, to our expectations of behavior, to our laws, to our authorities, to our people. We don't want such kind of people on the territory of our country. And we, as a sovereign country, must have the right to make our decision on our own, whom we allow to enter the territory of our country and whom we do not allow. This is a matter of sovereignty.
Foreign Minister, we've only got a little over a minute. I want to talk to you briefly, if we know it's fine. It's been very interesting, and particularly about what's happening on your border and at the levels of violence. But I want to turn briefly. You talk about keeping Hungarian, if I can put it that way. Yeah. You've been criticised for your pro-natal policies, the bribes, as some people see it, offering young Hungarians money, the opportunity not to pay any income tax, free IVF, so that they have children. In the jargon, we call it pro-natalism. There'll be some people in the West looking at that saying it's about keeping Hungary ethnically pure. That's the criticism. Do you have a problem with that?
Sorry to say, but this is a stupid criticism because, we really consider it a value if there are more and more children being born in the country. That's why we support the people, the mothers and the fathers, to have as many children as it is just possible. The principle behind our policy is that if you have a kid, you must not end up in a worse situation compared if you did not have a kid. Okay, so that's why we ensure the free schooling. That's why we give all kinds of benefits based on children in the family when it comes to housing, when it comes to the tax exemption. So the more kids you have, the biggest part of your salary is being exempted from personal income tax. And this is our most strategic political focus, to help children to be born.
It's interesting you use the word strategic, because you spend, the Hungarian government, just ponder this, viewers and listeners, 4 times more on these sorts of offers, pro-natalist measures, than you do on your defence budget. And you spend plenty on defence. Peter Siarto, we have to leave it there, but we really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you. Let's take you through our 5 stories that we'd like to tell you about before 5 o'clock. And we start with this one at 5, the John Constable masterpiece. The Hay Wain suffered minor damage yesterday when environmental activists vandalised the painting. 2 Just Stop Oil protesters placed a mock-up painting of their own on top of the original at the National Gallery before gluing themselves to the frame of the 200-year-old artwork. Experts found minor damage to that frame and the varnish covering the painting after taking it down for examination. We haven't got any... Oh, there we go. At 4, an energy super hub believed to be the largest in Europe and with the capacity to charge hundreds of electric cars launched today. £41 million. It's an energy hub in Oxford. 42 EV charging points can recharge a car in as little as 20 minutes. At 3, some cinemas have banned young people from wearing suits from screenings. And how many kids wear suits? Screenings of Minions. The rise of Gru over rowdy behaviour fuelled by a TikTok trend. Teenagers following the hashtag Gentle Minions have been accused of making noise and throwing things during screenings, with video footage of the incidents racking up millions of views. At 2, the University of Essex is looking into the benefits of fishing on the mental health of veterans. The Angling for Good scheme will see former servicemen and women taking to the rivers of the UK, with academics hoping the results will build on previous research that showed that fishing can ease the strains of PTSD. And at 1, footage has been shared of people playing football on the M4 as those tailbacks yesterday left drivers stranded. The video shows people getting out of their cars to have a kickabout on the opposing empty carriageway. There you go. 5 things you might want to know about before 5 o'clock. Kelvin Mackenzie has replaced the Hungarian Foreign Minister next to me. Welcome to you. Welcome back. The Hungarian Foreign Minister, on this point about their pro-natal policies, we had a demographer in yesterday who was making much the same point. And the inbox fills up with people saying, you men telling women to have children. I always say to people, there is a big gap between the number of kids women want and the number they're having. And that's not being some patriarchal bloke wagging his finger. That's about choice, isn't it?
It is about choice. And I don't know, I didn't see the demographer, but was it the guy from Oxford?
It was, Paul Morland.
OK, so his point was quite clear. His point was the Hungarians' point, actually. We should be encouraging more births. And if we don't, by the way, we'll be in Japan, in which everybody's over 180. And who is going to do the work?
I think robots might, to some degree, in Japan.
No. Well, Well, they might do, but they're not going to do them over here because there'll be trade unions. Oh, mate, no, you can't do that, Squire. No, that's not going to happen. We need children.
Okay.
And we're not having enough of them.
On that point, Kelvin, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much indeed. Much more news coming up. Stay with us.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGiven from the Met Office. It's a fine day for many of us with some sunshine out there, but also a lot of cloud. And later, cloud will thicken in the northwest as areas of rain move in from the northwest. Weather fronts toppling in around a large area of high pressure that is sitting to the west of the UK. Now that is extending a ridge into much of the country, so hence the fine weather for the rest of the day. But the weather fronts that are toppling in from the northwest, well, they're going to bring some persistent wet weather to northern and western Scotland and some dribs and drabs of rain to southern and eastern Scotland, then northern England after midnight, as well as North Wales and perhaps Northern Ireland. A lot of cloud extending south as well. And with the cloud and with a freshening breeze, it's going to be a mild night. Certainly temperatures a bit higher compared to the last couple of nights, but a bright start for southern and southeastern counties where the cloud doesn't quite reach from the northwest. A cloudy start elsewhere, and we've got that continued wet weather for western Scotland, particularly over the hills of the west. The rain tends to ease through the day, and eastern Scotland sees some brighter interludes at 20 Celsius in Aberdeen, but a gusty wind for northern areas will make it feel cool in many spots. And in the south, well, a warmer day to come, 24 to 27 Celsius in places. So plenty of sunshine and clear skies as we end the day on Wednesday, but a lot of cloud elsewhere and further light outbreaks of rain across northern areas. But even in the north, that rain is tending to fragment and disappear by dawn on Thursday. A mild night to come, so a mild start on Thursday, but a generally cloudy start, a lot of grey skies out there. And it may take some time across central and southern parts of the UK for that cloud to lift and break up. But it is looking brighter as we end the week. For most, it's looking warmer as well, with highs into the high 20s.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Coming up live at 5, Britain's transport network is on the verge of being derailed with the threat of more industrial action this summer. The train drivers' union, ASLEF, is balloting members on strike action, which could see the cancellation of 90% of trains. Chaos too at the airports. British Airways axing flights for up to 105,000 holidaymakers this month. The travel editor at The Sun, Lisa Minor, will join us. Countries around the world could soon be competing for the top spot on the UK's deportation list. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is set to introduce the so-called League Table of Nations, judging them on their level of cooperation in accepting criminals and failed asylum seekers from the UK. Former Director General of the UK Border Force will have his say. And the CERN Large Hadron Collider switched on today for the first time in 3 years, or up to speed for the first time in 3 years. 2 high-energy particle beams will travel at close to the speed of light before they collide, creating unprecedented levels of energy. Dr. Tara Shears, a particle physicist working on the project, will explain all before 6 o'clock. I think it's highly unlikely she'll be able to explain all before 6 o'clock. Joining me throughout, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin McKenzie. First, the latest news headlines with Olivia.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 5. Here's the latest in the GB newsroom. Downing Street says the Prime Minister forgot there'd been a complaint against Chris Pincher in 2019. The MP resigned as the Tory Deputy Chief Whip following claims he'd groped 2 men while drunk at a private members' club last week. Since then, other historic complaints have emerged, but Number 10 previously said Boris Johnson wasn't aware of any specific allegations. Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner says the disclosures reveal an ethical vacuum at the heart of Downing Street.
Prime Minister was personally informed about these allegations, and yet he was either negligent or complicit. What message, Mr. Speaker, does this send about the standards of this government?
Well, the Cabinet Office Minister Michael Ellis defended Boris Johnson.
We do have a Parliament, Mr. Speaker, as you know, that upholds standards to cover all of those in public life. No system can replace the fundamental importance of personal responsibility. We all know this to be true. Codes and rules and oversight bodies are there to guide us, but we all ultimately in public life must choose for ourselves how to act.
6 people have been arrested in London as part of an international operation to tackle people smuggling. The arrests were carried out by officers from the National Crime Agency in the Docklands and Catford. The operation targeted criminal networks suspected of using small boats to smuggle thousands of people into the UK. Dozens of raids are also taking place in Germany, France and the Netherlands. A public inquiry into the death of an unarmed father of 2 concluded that he was lawfully killed, but found there were numerous failures throughout the operation. 28-year-old Jermaine Baker was shot at close range by police while taking part in an attempted prison break in London 7 years ago. The Met Police says changes have been made in how its firearms command operates since Mr. Baker's death. Italian media is reporting 8 missing climbers have been safely located after part of a mountain glacier collapsed. At least 7 people were killed in the avalanche on Sunday. Rescue workers described the scene as a disaster. They've been using drones and helicopters to look for victims. At least 5 are still missing. Sweden and Finland have taken the next steps in becoming members of NATO. 30 allies have signed off on the 2 Nordic countries joining the alliance, the most significant expansion of NATO since the mid-1990s. Next, individual parliaments of member countries will have to approve the decision, a process that can take up to a year. Scotland's bid to hold another independence referendum is being taken to the Supreme Court. The Scottish Chief Law Officer is referring the case after First Minister Nicola Sturgeon announced plans to hold a second vote in October next year. Lord Advocate Dorothy Bain QC is seeking a ruling over whether the Scottish Parliament has the necessary legal powers to hold the planned referendum. Climate change protesters have glued themselves to the frame of a copy of Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. 5 Just Stop Oil supporters attached themselves to the frame and spray-painted the words "No New Oil" onto the plinth under the painting. The campaigners are calling for the government to halt new oil and gas licences in the UK. And the last British singles player left in Wimbledon, Cameron Norrie, is on court number 1 this afternoon. The 26-year-old is battling Belgium's David Goffin in the quarter-final. Team GB's Alicia Barnett and Johnny O'Mara are also returning in the mixed doubles. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now it's back to Colin.
6 minutes past 5, a triple threat of strike action on Britain's rail network, just a matter of weeks away after members of the RMT walked out in a dispute over pay and working conditions. Today, the train drivers' union, ASLEF, has balloted members over industrial action later this summer. The RMT and the union, which represents onboard staff and ticket office staff, the TSSA, to give it its acronym, are also planning further action, a combined walkout they claim could close up to 90% of the whole network. It's not just trains that seem to be derailed, I should say, as the summer of discontent, if that's what it is, continues. Chaos in the air too. British Airways axing flights for up to 105,000 holidaymakers this month. Britain's biggest airline has told airport slot authorities that it's cancelling more than 650 flights from Heathrow and Gatwick in order to avoid a repeat of last month's travel trouble. Let's turn to the travel editor at The Sun, Lisa Minnow, who joins us now. Lisa, welcome to you. Where do you want to begin? On the trains or with the planes? You take your pick.
Well, we're not going anywhere on each, really, are we? I mean, that's half the problem. I mean, there really does seem to be no end in sight to the problems on both our railways and the airports. I mean, I hope that this, sort of latest round of cancellations by British Airways does mean that we can start to see the rest of the summer going off without a hitch. It could be up to 170,000 seats that are affected by this. Because obviously this now represents almost 11% of British Airways network that they're going to be cancelling in July. Now, that's a huge number if you think about it. I mean, they're our biggest airline, and many people would have been, planning these trips over a long period of time, having not been able to travel for the best part of 2 years.
Lisa, does anybody know how many holidaymakers desperate to get away post-lockdown have looked at the pictures from airports around the country and thought, this isn't worth a candle. If you think I'm going to sit in one of those airport terminals with the children in sweltering hot temperatures, forget it. I'll rather stay at home and go to Cornwall.
Yeah, I mean, we run regular polls in our digital section, and actually some readers are saying up to a third of them, this is not for me this summer, thank you very much, I'll stay at home. And it's a massive own goal by the travel industry, really, in that, this is the point in time where really they were desperate to get people travelling again. They wanted people to refill those coffers that had been devastated by the pandemic and 2 years worth of lockdowns, travel corridors, traffic lights. And this is a huge own goal. People will look at these chaotic scenes and say, well, actually, do you know what? I think I'm going to either stay at home or find a different way to get away this summer.
Lisa, while we've got you, we've got to talk about the trains. I was talking to Simon Calder in the last hour, who was saying, I know it's an eye-catching figure. It doesn't make it any less true, but the average salaries earned by the train drivers who belong to the ASLEF train rail union. If you're going to win a strike action, if you're going to persuade the government to cave into union pressure, you have to have the public on your side. How many members of the public are going to be sympathetic to a union who are demanding more cash for train drivers, some of whom are earning before overtime £77,000?
Yeah, I mean, I think I quite agree. I think there's going to be, definitely people who hardworking, some readers looking at that and going, look, do you know what? I wish I had that kind of a problem. It's also worth bearing in mind that actually, commuting this in the last strike, wasn't really that badly affected. People have got used to working from home. And actually, the people that are most affected by this are perhaps some of those who aren't able to sit in front of a computer like I am, but they're the ones that are actually doing, jobs where they are required to be there in person, in hospitality and retail. And it really is hitting those who are earning the least when we have these kind of strikes. It is quite incredible that, we are looking at yet another summer of real problems for people who can least afford to have their actual sort of working lives disrupted.
Lisa Minnow, appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. Kelvin McKenzie alongside me today. What do you make of that story, Kelvin?
Well, as somebody who is going on a tennis holiday with my son and grandson very shortly to southern Spain, I recognise that this is a massive issue. Now, the first thing that we've all done is we are only going to have carry-on stuff. The idea of getting in a queue 12 miles long at Heathrow in order to go through some really overworked man employed by BA is out of the question. What the train people are doing is naked blackmail. They're using mugs like me, you, anybody who uses the trains, and using us as a battering ram to smash through their pay, right? We should take them on and we should shut down the railways and starve them out. We should treat them like the miners. It's a disgrace.
Kelvin, for now, thanks very much indeed. The Home Secretary is looking to create a so-called league table of nations based on their level of cooperation in accepting criminals and failed asylum seekers from the UK. Priti Patel will look to use the ranking system to place sanctions on countries that refuse to take back foreign criminals and reward countries who do take back foreign criminals, with visa applications being one thing that can be offered in return. There are currently 11,300 foreign criminals living in communities in the UK awaiting deportation. The former Director General of the UK Border Force is Tony Smith, who joins us now. Tony Smith, welcome to you. Will this work?
I hope so, Colin. I think it's a very good idea that people get to see what's going on here. Because one of the huge problems in immigration control, of course, is removals and returning people. And it's become a real problem for the Home Office and the Border Force immigration enforcement to remove anybody, because a great many of these countries won't cooperate. And we can't remove anybody unless we've got an agreement that they'll take them back. So I do think there is a quid pro quo here. Where we do need to engage with source and transit countries and say to them, look, you have an obligation to take your own nationals back if they don't qualify to stay here. And many, many countries, as you know, are ducking that issue. And I think it's really important that the public understand there is a foreign policy issue here, and we need to make the best use of it so that we can start getting immigration enforcement going again.
Are they ducking it, Tony, or do they simply lack the ability to do anything about it? I mean, if you look at this league table, countries like Bangladesh, Eritrea are countries that seem least able to take back to their country foreign criminals that have come to the UK, committed to a crime, or asylum seekers whose applications have failed. I mean, are they saying, no, we don't want them back, you keep them, or are they so disorganised, for instance, that they can't make that system of repatriation work?
No, this is very straightforward, actually, Colin. This is a political game that's being played here. I was involved in a lot of this work when I was in the Home Office, and it's a simple application to the embassy here for a passport in the same way that anybody else would apply for a passport. But quite often the migrants themselves won't comply with that process. They won't fill out any forms. They won't give us the necessary documents. And so it really is a question of us making sure that we are able to engage with these countries and say, look, it is your responsibility to document your own passengers for return. And so I do think people need to understand this. Now, the Border Force quite often get beaten up in immigration enforcement, the Home Office not deporting people, but I think people really need to understand that borders these days is a two-way street, and unless we can actually persuade countries to document their own nationals to take them back, then whether or not they qualify to stay, we haven't really got an effective border control.
We hear so much, don't we, Tony Smith, about joined-up government. Is this not a classic example of where there should be more joined-up government? You've got the Home Office saying, we want you, Bangladesh, to cooperate more with us. And if only the Foreign Office would fall into line, or the Department for, the Foreign Aid Department, and then you could say to them, look, work with us on this, accept back people who have no right to be in the UK, back to Bangladesh or Eritrea, wherever that is. And if you don't, the foreign aid is going to be cut, and you will lose tens and tens of millions of pounds.
I agree with that, actually. I think that's absolutely right. I think it requires a line of effort across Whitehall, not just within the Home Office. The Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office have a role to play. And I think that, this is such a significant issue now that it does require a across Whitehall joined-up approach, not just a Home Office or a Border Force approach. And there are a number of strings attached. I mean, we're running around the world now, aren't we, introducing new trade agreements after Brexit with various countries, all have strings attached. There are supposed to be new arrangements going in place with the European Union under the Trade and Cooperation Agreement after Brexit. And I think there really does need to be a very, very significant cross-Whitehall effort to get this clause in there that if you want to do business with us nowadays, you will accept your own nationals back. And if you don't, then there's going to be a penalty.
Tony Smith, appreciate your time as ever. Thanks very much. Now, Downing Street says the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, failed to remember he'd been told that Chris Pincher was the subject of an official complaint about his conduct. The Prime Minister's spokesman made the U-turn announcement after initially denying the Prime Minister knew anything about the former Deputy Chief Whip's conduct, now confirming Boris Johnson was briefed on the complaint by officials at the Foreign Office in 2019. The MP for Tamworth was suspended last week after being accused of groping two men at a private members' club whilst drunk. The political editor of the Express Online is David Maddox. He's joined us here in the studio. David, welcome to you.
Hi, Colin.
Is this one of those stories that really could do the Prime Minister damage? It's done him some damage already.
So I've literally hot-footed it up from Parliament, and the last two conversations I had before I left were with two previous Loyalist MPs who said
decided
to me,
they're going to put their letters in.
said to me that the Prime Minister is on borrowed time. It's currently running on our website, and they've had enough. And these were two absolute rock solid. I mean, last week I saw one of them berating one of the Tory rebels. So, I think this is a turning point.
Obviously, you can't name them, obviously. You can't talk about the constituency, but can you talk about the type of constituency?
Well, they're both Red Wall MPs.
Yeah. Wow. Kelvin McKenzie.
Well, that doesn't surprise me. I mean, the Red Wall MPs are all going to be out of work in a couple of years, so don't worry about that. I mean, this is, the Tories have had a very, very good run, and it honestly feels like the end of it. And the reason that I'm not hostile to Boris as a person, but it clearly lacks political judgment, and it's quite clear that the Tories are coming to the end of it. And one of the problems is that were Boris to go, nobody has any idea who would take his place. Jeremy Hunt looks like, I read something in the Times today, looks like a busted flush. They're now talking about Ben Wallace. Well, honestly, love him, but he's never going to carry it. If I'm Starmer, I'm thinking, please, Durham police, don't do this to me. I have a very good chance. Or a mixture of the Liberals. Something is going wrong at the moment, and the Tories are clever. They're normally ruthless. They haven't been ruthless. They were ruthless with Theresa May. They have not been ruthless with Boris. It's just because they don't have a Boris to take Boris's place.
David, is there anything Boris can do to turn the tide, do you think? Or...
It's increasingly difficult to see. I mean, I think I've written about at least 3 or 4 resets that Boris was supposedly doing, mostly around policy. But, we sit in Parliament every day and everybody's kind of just twiddling their thumbs, chatting, because the government's not bringing anything forward. There's massive cost of living crisis. There are huge issues to be dealt with.
The government's not here to answer that charge. Yeah. I mean, the government is bringing stuff forward, isn't it? I mean, I've just done an item about something Priti Patel's done that actually comes from the Nationalities and Borders Act, which is bits of which are working.
And actually Priti has been one of the more active ministers. I always think that she's unfairly criticised, actually, a lot. I mean, especially over things like the Rwanda policy as well, which I think is a genuinely good policy, the ECHR aside. But, there is not an awful lot happening, actually. And, and one of the ways you can see that there's not a lot happening, it's a very technical thing, but you have days of backbench private members' bills. And when you have those in the middle of a week, instead of a Thursday or a Friday, you know that something's going wrong. And increasingly, there's a feeling that this government is more about trying to keep Boris alive and keep him in office. And, and to, answer the point that Kelvin's just raised, he's surrounded by a cabinet who largely might not get a job with somebody else and are unwilling to put the knife in.
But you've got a picture on there of Rishi. Now, I was at a afternoon do on Sunday in an obscure part, Staines, right? Not the natural home of the Tory party, right? And who should turn up there but Rishi and his missus in the afternoon, right? Because there were a load of journos there and there were some politicians there. There is no doubt in my mind that despite all who can take his place, Rishi will be up there and central. He is working the room. When you turn up in Staines on a Sunday afternoon, don't think about it, you're running.
But he may well have missed his chance. I mean, if he'd resigned in January when we thought he might resign and he'd pushed the button on it, he'd probably be Prime Minister.
He's got a lot of fans, Rishi. I'm one of them, except you have to accept, surely, that somebody who was reluctant to commit to this country such that he kept a green card until a couple of years ago can't be that serious about being the most important politician.
The only journalist would raise that issue. Yeah. The normal punter has no idea what a green card is, have they? I agree.
No, I tell you what it means. It means he probably fancied his chances of being an American rather than a Brit. That's what it means.
He was hedging his bets. Well, hold on. I wish I had a green card. You wish you had one. And in fact, you pay quite a lot of money for one. Yeah. What's wrong? We'd all like a green card.
Actually, the bigger problem was his wife's tax arrangements. And I know they were all legal, but this is the Chancellor who is putting up our taxes against the advice of all his MPs, against the manifesto commitment.
I'm not being hostile to marrying rich women. If any rich women out there want to marry me, please make an orderly queue. Thank you.
David Maddox, on that note, we'll say thank you and thanks for coming in. And here's the story that's going to get you excited. The Large Hadron Collider is back at full speed after 3 years in the race to discover more about the building blocks of the world around us. It sparked some doomsday conspiracy theories, which we'll debunk for you after the weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a fine day for many of us with some sunshine out there, but also a lot of cloud. And later, cloud will thicken in the northwest as areas of rain move in from the northwest. Weather fronts toppling in around a large area of high pressure that is sitting to the west of the UK. Now that is extending a ridge into much of the country, so hence the fine weather for the rest of the day. But the weather fronts that are toppling in from the northwest, well, they're going to bring some persistent wet weather to northern and western Scotland and some dribs and drabs of rain to southern and eastern Scotland, then northern England after midnight, as well as North Wales and perhaps Northern Ireland. A lot of cloud extending south as well. And with the cloud and with a freshening breeze, it's going to be a mild night. Certainly temperatures a bit higher compared to the last couple of nights, but a bright start for southern and southeastern counties where the cloud doesn't quite reach from the northwest. A cloudy start elsewhere, and we've got that continued wet weather for western Scotland, particularly over the hills of the west. The rain tends to ease through the day, and eastern Scotland sees some brighter interludes at 20 Celsius in Aberdeen, but a gusty wind for northern areas will make it feel cool in many spots. And in the south, well, a warmer day to come, 24 to 27 Celsius in places. So plenty of sunshine and clear skies as we end the day on Wednesday, but a lot of cloud elsewhere and further light outbreaks of rain across northern areas. But even in the north, that rain is tending to fragment and disappear by dawn on Thursday. A mild night to come, so a mild start on Thursday, but a generally cloudy start, a lot of grey skies out there. And it may take some time across central and southern parts of the UK for that cloud to lift and break up. But it is looking brighter as we end the week. For most, it's looking warmer as well, with highs into the high 20s.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Freedom is a privilege and must be defended. So said John Bolton, the former National Security Advisor to President Trump and US Ambassador to the United Nations. Let's turn to John Bolton right now to reflect on the meaning of freedom, and not least through the prism of Brexit, which he's been talking about in recent weeks. Welcome to you, John Bolton. I know you've said that as far as you can see, when you look at the landscape of international politics and particularly what's been happening in Ukraine, Brexit has been a source of liberation for the UK.
Absolutely. I think the European Union has proven for some time now it's less than the sum of its parts, so that when the referendum in 2016 began the process of bringing Great Britain out, this was a huge achievement. To break free of the cumbersome EU regulatory process, to be able to have your own foreign and defense policy again, basically to give Parliament control back over your laws. People, I don't think, fully understood the opportunities that awaited them, but I think we can see it now, certainly in the context of Ukraine.
Well, it's funny. I think people saw, you were in the States, we were following it day by day here in situ, but there was a sense in which Brexit was sold as a way of ploughing your own furrow economically. What's come as a surprise, a pleasant surprise, arguably, is that it's actually created a situation where the UK is boxing back at its previous weight on foreign policy.
No, I think that's very important. I think throughout the Ukraine crisis, in many respects, the UK has led the way in terms of policy and in terms of action. The Biden administration has often been a day late and a dollar short. And I think the most important thing is that that Britain is now a truly independent voice inside NATO. And it's not part of the EU decision-making process, which I've compared to a smoothie-making machine. It goes in and after days and weeks of deliberation, just mashed potatoes come out. But Britain's also playing now, I think, more actively than before in Asia. People are aware of the AUKUS combination, Australia, the UK, and the US, to provide nuclear-powered submarines to Australia to deal with the threat of Chinese attempts to establish hegemony along its periphery. So it's a big world out there. There are a lot of things that need to be done. And I think from the US point of view, it's very important to have a Britain with its own voice.
John Bolton, just on that point about the AUKUS pact, the AUKUS deal, how much does that idea of an Anglosphere, those parts of the world that are still joined and bound by historical ties of tradition and language, how much does that have a role to play in a world of superpower politics and realpolitik and China with all its billions to spend on buying up other parts of the world and winning influence?
Well, I think the common language, the common history, the common legal systems all certainly have a big impact. We still have, and it's very important, the so-called Five Eyes arrangement on intelligence sharing, which is unique in the world. I think we have to acknowledge that we're moving into a period where there are more and more global threats. The threat of terrorism is not over yet, that's for sure. I think its potential to recur in Afghanistan is very real. The threat of nuclear proliferation or chemical and biological weapons proliferation is great. China is an existential threat in this century, not just in the Indo-Pacific, but in Europe as well. We see what Russia's up to. We have not moved to the end of history. And the notion of self-defense of the Western democracies, I think, is more important than ever.
John Bolton, I'm joined here in the studio by a former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie. You may be familiar with Kelvin. He's got a question for you, I think.
Mr. Bolton, question, looking a couple of years ahead, do you think that Trump will be the Republican candidate or a candidate in the presidential election?
No, I don't think Trump is going to run again. Now, that doesn't exclude the possibility, even as we are talking today, that he's announcing he's going to run. He loves to be in the spotlight. He's worried he won't be. But deep inside, he knows he lost in 2020. He doesn't want to admit that. But he also fears losing in 2024. And the last thing he wants to be remembered for in history is being a loser. So when it gets right down to it, he won't run. He'll try and be the kingmaker within the Republican Party's nomination process. He may have some success at that. But we're going to have a lot of people running for president in 2024.
We just like one of them, John Bolton, who agrees to put the idea of a trade deal with the UK at the top of the in tray.
Well, that's where it should be. I mean, it's been a mistake, I think, on both sides that we haven't achieved this. But part of the problem, I think, if I may say so, is on the UK side for adhering to this EU idea that even as you're trying to withdraw from the EU, you can't cut trade deals with other people. You know, after the referendum, Britain should have said, we're effectively out. There are a few things that have to be negotiated. The people have spoken. We're going to start acting for ourselves. So we lost a lot of time. It's difficult now with the Biden administration, but in the mutual interest of both countries, there ought to be a much higher priority. Trade negotiations are always tough. There's no doubt about it. A lot of things are at stake. But in terms of the clear way ahead, I think a bilateral deal, expanding the USMCA, the North American trade area. There are a lot of possibilities here we ought to be exploring.
John Bolton, always appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed for it. Kelvin Mackenzie, just a brief thought from you, Kelvin. Do you think he'd rather a Joe Biden presidency or a Donald Trump presidency if it really came down to it?
Who? Bolton? He wouldn't want a Trump presidency, would he? Because he got fired by Trump. And he actually put the spoke in quite early, didn't he? I was surprised at his response, to be honest.
We'll come back to that. Now, as the Chris Pincher allegations rocked Number 10 in Westminster yesterday, GB News' political editor Darren McCaffrey sat down with the former Conservative MP, Neil Parish, who was forced to resign as it emerged that he was the MP who watched pornography in the Commons. Yesterday's interview with Parish was a wide-ranging look at his career in politics, the effect that his resignation as an MP had on him and his family, his view on Boris Johnson's premiership, and the double standards of treatment by Number 10 when people face misconduct allegations. Here's a look.
Neil, Mr. Parish, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I suppose, first of all, a very long career. I was in Brussels, not when you were there, but you were an MEP, weren't you, for a long
I was
time, and then an
chairman
MP.
of the Agriculture Committee over there.
And it's fascinating, isn't it, that, throughout your career, farming and agriculture have been the heart of what you've done in, more than 20 years, 25 years?
And I still have it in the blood, and it'll be in the blood to my dying days. So, even after such a horrendous mistake I made, even after resigning, I must keep that alive. I am talking later on this afternoon to people from the industry to see what help I can give. We're reforming agriculture policy, but we haven't got it right because we're not producing enough food, and all our policies, they're not designed to reduce food production, but that's what they'll lead to. And I think there's a morality now for us to help with food production, not only in this country, but across the world, because you see parts of Africa will starve. We will always be able to afford food because we can buy it, but they can't necessarily.
And is that what got you involved in politics?
It was really, and environment as well, and I like people, and I got very lonely on the farm, and I engage well with people. I'm a people's person, and so that's the bit I'm missing more than ever, and that's why I'm sure many in the hierarchy of my party would like me to remain buried very deep, but I don't intend to stay underground long, and I'm coming out now.
That's why, in some ways, you know, when we look at kind of that week or whatever, you know, when did it become clear to you that you had no choice, or were you told essentially you had no choice?
Yes, you see, my beef against the chief whip was that I said, you know, and all right, I was wrong, and I, you know, I've resigned. But you see, I said, can't I, you know, I never intended to offend anybody. I mean, I knew that I shouldn't be watching it. I never flouted the pornography. And so I wanted to be able to apologise to those concerned, and I wanted to be able to settle it privately, rightly or wrongly. And of course, the chief whip said, oh no, he said, I've told them to refer you to the Standards Board. And don't forget, this is a regime that, you know, has a deputy chief whip, Chris Pincher, who now is sort of standing, all right, not proven yet, accused of all sorts of things. And he was sitting in judgment of me.
Was it a moment of madness? How?
I mean,
I think it's one of these things where lots of people go,
right, yeah.
How does that even happen?
Yes, I mean, and of course that's part of me feels now it was a sort of nightmare that never happened, because it all happened so quickly. And you know, Harold Wilson said a week in politics is a long time, and so I'm almost sort of, and I was in denial at the time for a few days, but then I had to face reality, and with my wife we made the right decision to go. But you see, I have to hasten to add, it wasn't in the middle of debate in the House of Commons. It was 11:30 at night between votes. I was over in the corner of the chamber, not actually anywhere where you can ask a question, but I was technically in the chamber. Actually, I thought wrongly doing what I was doing, but I thought I was actually minding my own business between votes. Shouldn't have been doing it, but you see, the one thing I wasn't doing, and the one thing I'll look you straight in the eye and anybody in the eye, and I swear in any court of law of the land, I was not flouting it.
In saying that, you know, a lot of people will be watching this who don't work in Parliament, who don't work in politics, do ordinary jobs, and they know if they were watching porn at work and someone spotted them, they'd be instantly out through the door, wouldn't they? You understand the public outrage.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why, you know, I did, all right, a couple of days delay, but I actually did the right thing, and I don't regret that. And I think the trouble is, if we don't in politics actually in the end, you know, face up to our responsibilities, the public are going to think less and less of us. And I think, you know, it's not, I mean, all right, it's the Conservative Party at the moment that's particularly in the frame, but you know, members of Parliament come from all walks of life and all parties, and I'm afraid, you know, our behaviour does not come up to standard. And when you've been found out, when you've done wrong, you've got a choice. You can either stay there. I could have gone to the naughty step with everybody else and you know, perhaps ducked and dived, and may still be there now and may have got through it. Who knows? But is it actually worth it? I mean, I went cleanly. I thought that would help the party in a by-election, but I don't think it did, actually, because I think they then decided to compare my actions to the Prime Minister's. That was the problem.
In saying that, you know, I think the story broke during PMQs on that Wednesday, didn't it? And I interviewed you a couple of hours later on that Wednesday afternoon. You used the word denial there. I mean, I asked you about it, and it seemed extraordinary at the time you didn't kind of own up to it. Well, what happened?
I was wrong, but I suppose, like I said, what do you do when you become sort of slightly terrified about what you've done, and you sort of see your whole political career going up in flames? And so at that stage, I was totally in denial, and I think, you know, there is so I mean, whether I could have ever claimed, you know, temporary insanity or whatever, I don't know, but you know, I mean, you can imagine I wake up very early these days. I mean, I've lost quite a lot of weight. I don't say this is the best way to lose weight. I don't recommend it, but so it's on my mind a lot of the time. So yes, I mean, it was a mistake, but it was almost as though it was sort of unreal in some ways, and you knew what you'd done. You see, I still wanted to be able to try and rightly or wrongly sort it out privately. Hence, I was sort of bounced into that, because I should have thought you were going to ask me that question. I probably shouldn't have come on that day in hindsight. But that's nonetheless. You see, once you've behaved badly, you have got to take responsibility. And that's when talking to my wife, who's been a great supporter of me. She's the rock of ages. And so, you know, you talk to the family and you make the right decision.
So that must have been really, you know, aside from the allegations, you know, the police, I think, came and they took your guns away. As you said, there was a lot of media attention. That must have been, you know, quite the 24, 48 hours at the end of that week.
On the police taking the guns away, please, what I would want to say publicly is that the police behaved very well, and they came back several times after they take my guns away just to check that I was okay, much more than, dare I say it, any duty of care from my own party. But so they took the guns away, not because I'd been threatening anybody or I'd had any problems with mental illness. It was just that in the circumstances they felt it was best for me not to have those guns. I'd even forgotten they were up there. They're shotguns. I only use them really for some clay pigeon shooting and frightening rooks when they come and eat the corn in the winter time, and so, you know, and try and keep them away. So but, you know, they were right to do so, and so I want to thank the police for the way they dealt with me.
It's clearly, though, still several months on, quite stressful for you, quite upsetting, frankly.
Yes, I mean, what you've got to do, though, and this is why I'm talking to you today, is because I need to come back. I've taken sort of not professional psychological advice, but some good friends I've got who know about psychology say that you mustn't hide away. You've got to come back out. You see, I went to the Devon County show on Friday, and I have to say, people were lovely, and it was nothing had happened. Now, lots has happened, and I'm no longer an MP. I'm no longer chair of the EFRA committee, which I loved, and I loved Parliament. But but for me, this is rehabilitation. You see, I like to talk. You see, I went into politics to get company and public life and to do things for people and my constituents. That's what I enjoyed doing, and so I'm not going to sort of back away from it now.
Do you feel then, in, you know, retrospect, hindsight, maybe do you regret resigning in the end? That actually, as you say, given what's happened, it's entirely possible, you know, you would have got through it in some ways.
Yes, but you see, when my family, and I not only talked to my wife, I talked to my son and daughter, and they both said, I think, Daddy, you've got to go. So, you know, you do the right thing. You don't always want to do the right thing. So I'm not trying to make myself into a hero, because I'm not. And I'm a man who's made a big mistake. You know, it was just wrong. So in the end, go. But you see, what I don't want to do and what I don't intend to do is disappear from the face of the earth, because I still have a lot in me, a lot of expertise, a lot of good things I can do, both with charity and with the farming sector, like I said, on food, animal welfare, fair share, you know, all people that need food. So lots of stuff out there. And so, you know, I'm a great believer in using one's talents. And even at this stage where I've blown my talents and my career to smithereens quite spectacularly, I have no intentions of going away and never being heard of again. And I've got to you do some good, and there's good in me, and I am actually quite a good person despite all this. If you ask I used to love talking to the doorkeepers. I like all the people in the restaurants. I always had banter with everybody. I used to get in the morning when I first got there 12 years ago and talk to everybody because I'm a country boy. I say good morning. I open doors for people. I'm traditional, and they all looked at me as I was mad. But after 12 years, they've all talked to me. And one thing I do want to clear up is I think one of my leading Conservative select committee chairs said that I was very wrong. I was patronising because I called women ladies. I was brought up in a farming family where it was disrespectful to call a woman. You called them a lady. So when I actually call somebody a lady, I may be old-fashioned, but I am not being disrespectful. So, there was a lot of stuff going on out there where, your colleagues who perhaps I think ought to know better should not have had that particular go at me.
You feel it hurts a lot still.
Well, it does, but on the other hand, I appreciate this interview because, you see, do you leave the hurt inside to burn you away, or do you bring it out? And do you get not your side of the story, but just the human side of it, and the fact that I was absolutely stupid, and offensive, but I didn't mean to be, and I was crazy at that moment in time. So, but does that mean that you are entirely finished? And I hope it's not, because I've still got a lot of good in me to do.
There's anger, I think, there as well, isn't there? I mean, you look at there's Conservative MPs facing rape allegations. We've got, as you say, the Deputy Chief Whip Chris Pincher facing multiple allegations. Another MP who's been pictured with drugs, and they're all still MPs.
Yeah, but you see, that's one of the reasons, but ironically, is one of the parts of my decision to go is that I thought, well, yes, I've made a huge mess, but I don't particularly want to go with them. Not being funny, because while I committed a crime against myself and it was very amoral, I wasn't in that category. I mean, for 3 days, I had the national media outside the House. For 3 days, they were going around Parliament trying to dig up something on me. Did you find it? No, you didn't, because it wasn't there.
But when you see the treatment of other MPs, you must feel it's unfair, though. Is it unfair?
Part of me feels, because I sort of, all right, I blew myself up, but 5 days and you're out of Parliament. Everything's shut down. That's the way the system works once you resign. And so I haven't said goodbye. I haven't. It's sort of unfinished business, if you know what I mean. I mean, I used to get on brilliantly with the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle. I had a very good rapport with people. I could debate well. I was quite funny when I was on form. I don't know. I don't know if I can leave it there. I may leave it there. I may have to leave it there. But I don't know.
Essentially, like if you're friends maybe with the Prime Minister, you get away with a hell of a lot more. And because you're a backbench MP, who wasn't in government, that you were treated in a whole different way. You were more expendable, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, you are expendable. And of course, don't forget, you see, I mean, I did, my wife always used to tease me and said, you enjoy putting the ministers up against the wall too much, because you see, I enjoyed my role as a scrutineer. Don't forget, you see, for 10 years in Parliament, I built, 12 years, I built my own world. I never had preferment. I worked out that I had an expertise on agriculture, environment. I circumnavigated the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Select Committee, and I took the chair, by over 300 votes in 2015. Nobody really ever decided to come back at me again. And so, because elections are about winning well, because you see off your opponents. So I built that up, and then I did hold the government to account. I was very independent, and I don't make any apologies for that.
Do you think, though, the Prime Minister should have removed the whip from Chris Pincher earlier?
Immediately. That's the bit that I have, because you see, the whip was removed from me before, I don't think there ever were any formal complaints made against me. What the chief whip had is the world's media, like I did, barking at him, and so he got frightened and he took the whip straight away from me, and then afterwards gave me no help whatsoever. And you see, this duty of care is what I really do feel strongly about this, because I want them to learn from what they did to me and not to do it to others. Because, you see, I had a good political career for over 20 odd years, but I'd always been able, like European Parliament, I'd always been able to keep my farm and my family separate. And all of a sudden, they are in your space. They're shouting abuse at you outside the door. And so I couldn't cope with it, really. But I had no help. So, you see, the party does need to not only use you when you're useful, but they can't. I wasn't a criminal. I was stupid. But, you see, the chief whip treated me as though I'd committed murder. And then part of the regime that took the whip away from me was Christopher Pincher. Well, I mean, I'm not going to comment on his behaviour, but I just ask people listening to this to make a judgment who was worse.
Do you think it calls into question the Prime Minister's judgment in some ways?
I think what it calls in with the Prime Minister, and I like Boris, and he's very good on the big calls, on the vaccines, on dealing with Russia, and Putin and helping Ukraine and all of these things. But the problem he's got is a problem of trust and a problem of integrity. Now, and I do gently question slightly his intelligence on this latest thing, because you have a situation where Christopher Pincher reportedly had a minder in order to keep him from, behaving badly. By all accounts, Boris must have known that Dominic Cummings knew what he used to nickname, Pincher by name, Pincher by nature. And so Boris says, I knew nothing of his behaviour, the previous behaviour. And so that's why he should remain with the whip.
Doesn't seem credible.
It's not credible. But the point I'm making is, that Dominic Cummings knows that about you. Dominic Cummings is there sharpening his knives every morning to see which one he can stick in. And so what he's immediately going to say, well, the Prime Minister knew, because that's what his nickname was. I mean, it's not... Not only is Boris ducking and diving again, but it's just not intelligent to fib, if you like, that you didn't know about his behaviour when somebody will prove categorically within a few hours or a day later that you did know. And don't forget, it's not only about the public now, it's about the members of Parliament. And don't forget, members on our side are seriously worried about Boris's trust. And do people trust him?
Just finally, on you've been a member of the Conservative Party for decades. You'll remember the 1990s. It feels like we're there again, doesn't it? Like almost week after week, there's a new allegation of sleaze or of breaking rules. Do you think the party's it's tired, it's falling apart? It maybe could do with a bit of time regrouping again?
Yeah, I mean, I know all about the 90s because I was a county councillor in 93 and lost my seat. And in 95, I lost my district seat after 12 years. And people said to me, Neil, we really like you. You work hard, but we're not voting Conservative. And you see, we must remember that. And when you lose the trust of people, you lose it. Now, I don't think we're quite at 97 yet. And I think if we can actually sort of get through this, and we will have to replace our leader. It's not if, it's now when. And I think, we could still, because Labour and Keir Starmer, nice guy, but he's not really cracking the mustard. The Liberal Democrats, yes, protest vote and they'll do reasonably well. But again, their revolution never quite comes. And so it's not all over, but by God, we aren't half drinking at the last chance saloon.
Doesn't sound like politics is over for you.
Not for me, not yet.
You think you'll run again at some stage?
I think I might. And I think the more I see the behaviour of some of those around me and some of those that made the decisions on me at the moment, I'm afraid yes, there is a bit of me that thinks, is it the last of Neil Parish? Maybe not.
Well, Neil Parish, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
The candid thoughts there of ex-MP Neil Parish in conversation with our very own Darren McCaffrey. Kelvin Mackenzie alongside me, former editor of The Sun, who appreciates a scoop or an exclusive interview. What did you make of that?
Well, I found it quite sickening, to be honest. I mean, it was the victimhood and the idea that he was going to come back. Look, men can't have a view about porn. 35% of everything that travels on Google is porn, right? To do it in Parliament in front of some women anyway, under any circumstance, he's nuts. I have no idea why he gave that interview. It won't have done him any good whatsoever. And all that it proved was that it was right to get rid of Neil Parish. The idea that he has a view about Pincher, right? OK, Pincher is more serious on this scale. But honestly, the idea that Parish is in judgment of anybody is totally ridiculous.
But you agree on one thing, and that is that the Tory party can't move on while Boris Johnson's still in charge, which is your view, isn't it?
I'm afraid it has become my view. It certainly wasn't my view. But honestly, why doesn't he just try doing the right thing? He's the blinking Prime Minister. For
Kelvin Mackenzie, we have to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it. Michelle Dewberry is next. Stand by.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a fine day for many of us with some sunshine out there, but also a lot of cloud. And later, cloud will thicken in the northwest as areas of rain move in from the northwest. Weather fronts toppling in around a large area of high pressure that is sitting to the west of the UK. Now that is extending a ridge into much of the country, so hence the fine weather for the rest of the day. But the weather fronts that are toppling in from the northwest, well, they're going to bring some persistent wet weather to northern and western Scotland and some dribs and drabs of rain to southern and eastern Scotland, then northern England after midnight, as well as North Wales and perhaps Northern Ireland. A lot of cloud extending south as well. And with the cloud and with a freshening breeze, it's going to be a mild night. Certainly temperatures a bit higher compared to the last couple of nights, but a bright start for southern and southeastern counties where the cloud doesn't quite reach from the northwest. A cloudy start elsewhere, and we've got that continued wet weather for western Scotland, particularly over the hills of the west. The rain tends to ease through the day, and eastern Scotland sees some brighter interludes at 20 Celsius in Aberdeen, but a gusty wind for northern areas will make it feel cool in many spots. And in the south, well, a warmer day to come, 24 to 27 Celsius in places. So plenty of sunshine and clear skies as we end the day on Wednesday, but a lot of cloud elsewhere and further light outbreaks of rain across northern areas. But even in the north, that rain is tending to fragment and disappear by dawn on Thursday. A mild night to come, so a mild start on Thursday, but a generally cloudy start, a lot of grey skies out there. And it may take some time across central and southern parts of the UK for that cloud to lift and break up. But it is looking brighter as we end the week. For most, it's looking warmer as well, with highs into the high 20s.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.